You're watching ChillyBoy Productions. I'm Larry ChillyBoy Chillson, and this is my top 10 worst movies of 2023. Now, before we get into this ranking, make sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button down below so that you can chill with me on each and every one of my latest videos. So, we have come to the end of yet another cinematic year. And while I do think 2023 was actually a good year for film, so many that I absolutely loved, well, it also had its fair share of clunkers. And that's what this list is here for. Those movies that just gave me heartbreak in the movie theater. And unlike Nicole Kidman, it didn't feel good for me watching these films. Now, I know every year it's this big discourse now on whether we should or shouldn't be doing worst of the year lists. Clearly, I'm on camp. Do what you want. And I'm going to continue to do worst of the year lists. Because at the end of the day, look, every time I post a video, including this one right here, anybody can sound off and tell me how terrible I am, how horrible my opinion is, how awful my setup is, my video editing skills, all that. I get critiqued any and every time I put myself out there on this internet. And that's what you're opening yourself up for each and every time you release anything into the public domain. And yes, I understand a lot of people put a lot of work into each and every single film, but once again, so do we all, right? If you have a job, if you have a channel, if you have a podcast, we all put a lot of work into our jobs, and that does not mean we are beyond critique. Not to mention, a lot of these folks who are like really anti worst of the year lists release pretty scathing reviews constantly throughout the year. So all that to say, I think the arguments against doing a worst of the year list may be perfectly valid for you, your personal opinions, and your personal value set. However, for me, it's all just white noise, and we're going to continue to do what we do over here. And if by some chance one of the people who worked on one of the films I mentioned today stumble upon this video and give me one of the couple hundred views that this thing is sure to get, I'm not disvaluing your work, but unfortunately, your work went to a project that didn't turn out so great. So with all that said and out of the way, this is just my own personal list. These are the films I had the least amount of love for coming out of the year. Some of you might have loved some of these films. Some of you may think I'm crazy for putting them down here. And yeah, there are some films I actually missed. Kind of like that Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey mess. I didn't watch it, so it won't be showing up. And there are probably a lot of other terrible films that released this year that I just missed. So if it's not there, I look forward to seeing your own personal lists in the comment section down below. So now that we've rambled enough, let's go ahead and get into the worst of the worst from 2023, shall we? Kicking things off, I have Meg to the Trench. This was not only one of the worst films of the year, but it was a really big disappointment. As somebody who actually had fun with the Meg, I was excited for this film. The trailers looked ridiculous, and that's not really what we got. We got that for the final act of the movie, kind of, but the first two-thirds are just boring slog, the same old mess that you get in every Jason Statham super serious action movie, bogged down with characters that you don't care about, with plot lines you couldn't care less about, all leading up to a third act that gets more fun, but never truly embraces the absolute bonkers nature that I had hoped for. I think it's time to let the Meg finally go extinct for good. Coming in at number 9, I have a film that I know many people actually really enjoyed. A lot of people say M. Night Shyamalan is back. He's doing his thing. This is one of his best films. Yeah, my ninth worst film of the year is Knock at the Cabin. Beside the plot just being absurd at its core, and the changes I heard they made from book to film really diluting the message overall. It's really problematic for me. I find the message to be this very insidious form of homophobia that, although I don't know was intended from M. Night Shyamalan, it's exactly what happened. I have a whole rant video about why I found this film to be extremely problematic, why I didn't enjoy what they did, and I think this is not the type of movie to put queer leads in, actually. Let us just get sliced and diced by a slasher rather than this religious hocus pocus. I didn't like it. I felt uncomfortable watching it. I thought the messaging was handled absolutely terrible. I thought the message was handled terribly across the board. Some solid performances and don't save an insidious underbelly with a pretty lackluster twist. Number 8 on my list was a film I saw during a Regal Mystery Movie Monday, which is pretty hit or miss. About 50% of the time you find some fun little gem, and the other 50% of the time it's absolute garbage. And that was the case with Hypnotic. Yeah, almost nothing worked in this film for me. Ben Affleck is sleepwalking through this role of twists and turns, which do not work. The action is incoherent. The twist of it all is absolutely absurd. But the worst part of it, it is a slog. It is boring. It's a poorly lit, poorly shot slog of a movie that trudges along to even get us to the absurdity of it all. I fell into hypnosis just trying to escape this movie theater experience. In the year 2023, we are still doing possession and exorcism supernatural horror films, and we're still doing them poorly. And while the Exorcist franchise continues to try to recapture the magic and awe of the first one, and while The Exorcist Believer wasn't good either, it still was not my least favorite exorcism movie of the year. That would go to number 7, The Pope's Exorcist. Now, Russell Crowe's having fun, but probably too much fun because this accent was outrageous and ridiculous. The special effects were just over the top. It was laden with every single trope and jump scare you come to expect. You can telegraph it all a million miles away. The family didn't give us much to root for, and the Pope's exorcist himself, played by Russell Crowe, was really the only redeeming factor with how much fun he was having. The plot was ridiculous. The climax of this film just gets so outrageous. Like, if you thought The Nun 2 ended in this dramatic, weird mess with that wine scene, you haven't seen The Pope's Exorcist, because the ending of this film is pure foolery. At the end of the day, The Pope's Exorcist delivered more unintentional laughs than it did scares. Are we ever gonna get another good possession film? Ever? So at number 6 for this worst of list, I have one of the most boring, uninspired, and forgettable films I saw in all of 2023, and that is Marlowe. This kind of neo-noir thriller mystery starring Liam Neeson and Jessica Lange. The cast was off the chain, but the film was buried beneath those chains because this screenplay was not good. The dialogue, the characters, the actual plot itself was all highly undercooked, extremely derivative. The plot is very derivative of so many other mystery thrillers we've seen, just done without the finesse and technique of the best of them. The acting is flat and wooden across the board. Liam Neeson looks like he's sleepwalking through the majority of this film. The cinematography is okay, it looks okay, but wow, they just give you absolutely nothing to care about in Marlowe, one of the most bland and uninspired mysteries, thrillers, neo-noirs I have ever seen. And yet, somehow, this isn't even the worst Liam Neeson film of the year. But we'll get to that. At number five, I have a small release that I saw during the Denver Film Festival that received a small release in the early parts of December, or at least it was scheduled to. I don't know. But the cast was stacked, including Tyler Ryder, who actually was in attendance to watch the film with us. Sorry, girl. You seem very lovely. Jacob Elordi and Ao Itibiri in their 1 millionth performance of the year, and Simon Rex. I wanted to like it. I really did. Instead, I ended up really despising it across the board. Now, I'm giving it just a bit of grace because it is such a small film. I'm not sure it really got a proper release anywhere. And that's why it's not even higher on this list. But the Sweet East was just a mess. Offensive, just to be offensive, without any good callback to that. Like using the R word egregiously throughout the film, but without ever giving that a resolve. Having blatant homophobia just ran in here for no good reason. Islamophobia ran in here for no good reason. Simon Rex, can you not play a creep challenge? Is it possible, or are you just always a pedophilic creep in everything you do these days? Honestly, Ao Ediberi and Jacob Elordi's little segment was the saving grace of this film, and I wish we had just been following Ao Ediberi's character around. Other than that, it was pointless. It's this journey for this girl, this whiny girl that I could not connect with even in the slightest. Ran away from home into the arms of terrible man after terrible man, which I know is probably the story of many a girl's and many a teen, really. But we didn't get any context, really, to her home life, to why this was even occurring, other than her boyfriend made her mad. It was all ridiculous. No, the film didn't work for me, top to bottom. I didn't like it. I couldn't wait for this movie to end, sitting in that movie theater, and to hit that exit. Now, you know we couldn't get through a worst of the year list without featuring a Gerard Butler film now. Honestly, while I didn't love Plane, like everybody else had such a good time with it, I wasn't enamored. It's head and shoulders better than the worst Gerard Butler film of the year, and that is Kandahar, which actually was another film I saw at the Mystery Movie Mondays at Regal, and plays into every single one of the worst tropes in these throwaway Gerard Butler action films. The oversaturated orange hues to depict that we're in the Middle East, the big bad Middle Eastern people running around having to be taken down by the white savior Gerard Butler badass. The choppy editing in all of the action set pieces, the characters we couldn't care less about. Gerard Butler's character literally only being defined by his children and having no other redeeming quality or reason to care about him at all, other than his daughter. The script is terrible. The performances are all pretty much shoehorned in, and it plays into the same xenophobic tropes we've seen in 1,000,001 Gerard Butler films at this point. Can we move on from this shtick, please? Please. Welcome back to the list for your second appearance in the top 10 worst movies of 2023, Liam Neeson. That's right, he gave us two absolute stinkers in the year 2023. And the worst of them was Retribution. And guess what? It was another Regal Mystery Monday. I promise. Regal has given us a lot of really fun ones as well, but woo, woo, you were really playing a dangerous game walking into that Mystery Monday. Much like Kandahar plays into all of the worst tropes of a Gerard Butler film, Retribution plays into all of the worst tropes of a Liam Neeson film. You think it could be fun because it's all set within a car and you really don't leave that car very often, but the action is just not good. Liam Neeson as a character is not good, not redeemable, really. His kids, well, they border on annoying with a lot of really stupid character decisions performance from Neeson and everyone else around him. The cinematography is pretty terrible throughout. The camera work, pretty terrible throughout, all laid upon a screenplay that is truly horrible. A mess, top to bottom. Some may view this as just another throwaway Liam Neeson action dad film. I thought it was much worse than that. Yeah, I feel like I need retribution, probably monetary retribution, Liam Neeson, for putting up with this year after year. Weren't you supposed to be retiring from action movies? What happened to that idea? Speaking of retiring from action films, that leads us right into the runner-up for worst film of 2023. We have Expendables. Expendables 4, whatever the hell this title is, an absolutely ridiculous way to put this phonetically. Ooh, now look, I've never really been into the Expendables series. I thought the first one was kind of fun, a cool-ish premise, and then it just dive bombed right off a cliff from there. But this is a definitive rock bottom for the franchise. Absolutely terrible. These actors give the definition of phoning it in. Jason Statham, welcome back. You also have seen multiple entries on this list. Oh, a ridiculous character in this film. Him and that Megan Fox mess was wretched. All of these old men running around here, 50 Cent actually listening to 50 Cent in the movie happens. And yes, it's just as asinine as it sounds. The action is terrible because they have to cut and jump so much you don't even know what the hell you're looking at. The script, oh my gosh. This is probably the worst screenplay of 2023. I mean, there's dad jokes and dad humor. That's one thing. This, is there such a thing as like great grandfather humor? Like 20 years after he's already been in the grave, we reached in and grabbed a joke? Because that's how dead, tired, and late these jokes were in this film. Nothing in this felt authentic, even in the slightest. All of the hokey jokey mess was a fool. The twist that comes is a complete fool. And it's way, way too long. Like, what are we doing? Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't stand Expendables 4. And I like it even less when you read it Expendables, like it's spelled. So this year I just have a few dishonorable mentions that I'd like to bring some attention to before we hit that top spot or bottom spot, depending on how you look at things. I'd be remiss if I did not mention Sound of Freedom. The film was not good enough on its own to overcome the creator behind its controversies, the funders behind its controversies, the really insidious nature of the marketing. The film itself is okay at best, but it still has that flat, like Angel Studios TV look to it with a pretty undercooked script. I can get on board with what it's doing. Some of the action is kind of fun, but sir, you're gonna have to do a lot better outside of the film world before you try to give anybody lessons on morality. I mentioned it when I talked about Kandahar, but Plane was not for me. It had a lot of the same tropes that Kandahar had, including like that filter was there, Gerard Butler going into a foreign country and beating up the POC that lived there. It's there too. It was just slightly better, a little bit more entertaining, and the action was definitely better this time around. But again, Gerard, beat up some white people at home next time. Big George Foreman and the ridiculously too long title really just kind of played like a bad TV biopic. The acting was okay, but the cinematography had much to be desired. The screenplay had so much ground to cover that it never could stop to breathe and really let us know what was going on. And then the preaching was a bit much by the end of it. Strays was an overly crass, overly ridiculous comedy about dogs that wasn't really that funny. I can get on board with some crass humor, but this kind of weird dog crassness just didn't work. There wasn't nearly enough cuteness, because it was there. Some of the dogs were cute, but wow, talk about potty humor dialed up to a 12. Yuck. And then finally, just barely missing, my 10 worst of the year was About My Father, starring Robert De Niro. Some of the heart between father and son was there, but wow, did these jokes miss? It just wasn't funny, like at all. It tried to play up all these stereotypes that just did not work at all. The romance at the center of the film that we're supposed to be like rooting for was deceptive and weird and didn't work at all. I'd really have rather known a lot less about your father, if we're being honest. So coming in at number one, my pick for the worst film of 2023 is actually a film I saw way back in January of last year. One of the first films I ever made a short film review for, actually. And I knew it was so terrible that it was going to be hard to beat this year. And, well, as you see, nothing was able to top it. Yeah, the worst film of the year for me was House Party. The remake to the 1990s kind of cult classic comedy flopped hard. It wasn't funny at all. The characters were not likable at all, and they did not capture any of that charm from the original film. It's laden with 1990s references still, even though it's set in modern day with LeBron James. Sir, oh my gosh, stop. You're not an actor, LeBron. You may be the king on the court, but in front of the screen, it's giving stale, moldy bread. I guess I'm glad Maya got a gig, but what are we doing? Having a grown-ass man with Maya posters above their bed and like fantasizing about her in the year 2023? Huh? Now, I didn't watch White Man Can't Jump, or I presume that remake likely would have been on this list as well, but there's a certain era in time, really the 90s, and I would say even the early 2000s, I'll be watching for you, Mean Girls, are a really tough time to remake those films, particularly comedies. 80s and 90s, half of the 2000s at least, you could get away with a whole lot. And there was a certain air in the culture that is just not present in the year 2023. House Party still tried to make a film that would have worked maybe back in 2023, though it's nowhere near as funny or as fun as the film it was remaking, laden with lame ass jokes, lame ass references. A comedy that makes me roll my eyes more than I even chuckle is a straight up fail. And that's why I named House Party my pick for the worst film of 2023. So that's my list. Those are my picks for the worst movies of the year. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead, click like down below and subscribe to the channel so that you are always up to date on all of my latest videos, including my video for the best films of 2023. Also, let yourself be heard. I want to hear what films you thought were the worst of 2023. Leave your own rankings and lists either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.